Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And I hope you're well, and I'm very much looking forward to speak today about the 5 branding trends for 2026. For those who don't know me, I'm Yuri Saverchel, the founder of Creative Supply. And today it's, first of all, a Happy New Year day. But when I wrote that slide, Happy New Year, I also thought maybe it's a bit weird New Year. And when I said weird New Year, I'm thinking about all the things you are thinking as well, I believe. From economic uncertainty to whatever Trump is saying next, to price war, economic anxiety, etc. And AI. We'll speak about AI, no worries. In that context, we will be speaking about branding trends. And I think it's important that we keep them kind of in mind. And the way I have structured today's webinar is kind of twofold. I will share with you first 5 branding trends, things we see at Creative Supply in the work that we do. And then I would like to have a bit of a deeper focus on what it means to build brands in the age of AI. So AI, everybody's talking about it. It's a bit of, it's definitely a buzz as well, but it's definitely changing a lot of things as well. And I'd like to take some time to give you some insights and idea about that. And at the end, as always, we'll keep some time for questions or comments that you might have. So if you have some during the presentation, write them down so that you can straight ask questions or place comments. Without further ado, let's get started with our 5 branding trends. So the first one that we see, this trend has been going on for, to be honest, a couple of years now, but I think we've reached a whole new level. We call this perpetual novelty, the idea that you always need to have something new. And by the time the hour has passed, something new has popped up. This is definitely due to the increase in content. We'll speak later on about synthetic content, actually, which means that as brands, the only way to stay relevant is to have something to say, something to do, something that make people talk about you. And we'll see this is increasingly difficult in the age of AI, obviously, but it still means that if you don't play it, then how do you stand out? Or we need to find different channels. So the notion to always having something new to say, whether it is the next TikTok video, whether it is doing some sort of a new pop-up partnership, like you see on the screen, the one from Beaumier Hotels in Monaco, or Haiti in China that is doing a partnership with a fashion brand, Fragment, etc. And there's always something that is there to create news, right? So I think this notion of perpetual news. The second trend, it's something that I'm not sure why, but it's not so much talked about in the West. And my gut feeling is that it makes the West a little bit uncomfortable, but it is definitely a reality and we cannot ignore it at many levels. And let's discuss that. And I'm talking about the arrival and the rise, I would say more than arrival, of Chinese brands. You know, there was a time where Chinese brand or made in China meant a bit of a lower quality and a cheap product, but that's not really the case anymore because the quality is definitely on par, if not better. And the price point, most of the time, is still cheaper, but that's more of a Chinese strategy than a necessity, actually. Many industries are concerned. Anything that can be industrialized, from electric cars, China is now the big leader in the world. Fashion, urban revival, which is the Zara killers, as they call it in China, that has now opened a shop in New York. Bosideng, that is doing some sort of Canada Goose-like jackets, that opened in London. Or Xiaomi, that has been growing crazily in many countries where iPhone is simply far too expensive. So aside the dimension of, there is more competition if you sell car in Europe, for example, I think what this means from a branding point of view is that the speed at which Chinese brand operates is inconceivable in the West, especially in Europe. But customers will not make the difference whether they are buying a BYD car or Volkswagen car, and they will get very fast used to the speed of execution, 360 service offered by Chinese brands. The same way you get used to take a Uber and no need to have a wallet to pay for anything, the same will happen, which means as, let's say, legacy European brands, we will need to match the speed level of those if you want to remain competitive, or find ways to create value at different level and say, well, we are super slow, but what you get is so much better at different level. A bit of a blue ocean strategy here. To be seen, I think it's a story in development. I am involved with the SIBS Business School in Shanghai. Once a year, I talk to about hundreds of executives from China who are looking at doing what we call true high, which means going abroad in Chinese. And the quality of their thinking, the ambition, makes it really, really hard to beat. And I think that's a trend that's here to stay. I think it concerns more physical goods industry than maybe digital service, even though TikTok, as a reminder, is a Chinese app. The trend number 3 is a combination of different things. Humanless brand experience. It's a combination of improvement technology, typically AI, that allows pretty much anybody, to be honest, at the moment, to do very advanced things from a technological point of view, and at the same time, raising costs, operating costs, typically in Europe, of staff, of rent, etc., which basically is triggering ways to reduce operating costs. And the mix, the blend of those two macro factors, if you like, is creating the need to actually offer brand experience which are humanless. I'm not particularly fan of it as a human, to be honest with you, but I'm very excited about it from a creative standpoint, because it means, how do we make an experience exciting, emotionally loaded? How do we deal with friction? Or do we sometimes bring some friction at the experience or not, etc.? And I think that there's a lot that can be done here. There is this mindset at the moment that everything without human is budget. Everything without human cannot be luxury. I think this is changing. It's changing because people's mentality is changing, but also because the generation is changing. And you have to think that the consumer of today and tomorrow, who are in their, let's say, 20s, they were born with social media. They were born with chat. They were not born solving problem by calling someone or talking to someone. So they don't necessarily want to have a waiter each time they want to order something. So for our generation, we feel like, well, that's what service is about. It's a cultural thing and a generational element. A lot of the hotel clients we work with, for example, see that there is a decrease of business traveler eating out alone in the restaurant in the evening. They simply order. So that's an example of actually a humanless brand experience. Trend number 4, it's still connected to AI, and I think it's an interesting one, actually, from an art direction standpoint, at least. It's about humanizing AI. AI, everybody talks about it. It is not one day that goes without us hearing about OpenAI or Perplexity or a new robot that's going to come, etc. And we'll speak actually more about how to brand AI companies in one of our next webinars, because this deserves attention. But as a hint here, I want to talk about how those AI companies are going through big lengths to humanizing what they do, which is very paradoxal, obviously. And this can be seen, and you see on the screen here, the campaign of OpenAI, which I think is excellent. Some visuals done for Neo Robot, which is one of the personal aid robots that's launching this year, or another one for Perplexity, which is a competitor to ChatGPT to an extent, focusing on search and research. And all of them have this very kind of grainy, easy types of aesthetic, trying to make it like almost analog aesthetic, to make it look like they are part of the real world. And I think the level of disconnect between what those solutions really are, right? It's billions of lines of codes, and there's no humans involved, and it's just pure machine. It's completely intangible. It lives in servers, etc. And what we get to see there, which is focused on the customer experience mainly, and how human and real that feels. And I think what those guys are doing is a good indication for all of you who might be working on AI companies or AI solutions, because no matter how complex your solution is or your AI company is, it doesn't mean you have to make it look like Matrix when you brand it. And that I think is quite interesting, and we're going to see more and more in this. Now, obviously, with the rate of AI and everybody copying each other, now that this aesthetic has been developed and used by several companies, for sure people will copy this. So having always that constant update is going to be a challenge. We'll discuss this a bit later on. And finally, the fifth trend I have, light luxury. Light luxury is a term that comes from China, actually. It's very used in China. It refers to things that have a high quality, but that are still affordable from a price point. So your Bentley and your Patek Philippe watch is not light luxury. It's heavy luxury, so to speak. Light luxury refers to, your Louis Vuitton lipstick that costs you 100 euros, but you can still afford it. I think this is going to be a huge topic in the 1, 2, 3 years coming up, because especially in the West, there's no yet an economic crisis, but all surveys point to the fact that people are basically anxious and staying close to their money. So the time to buy that brand new car with all the options, maybe you wait a bit for it. Do you need that super fancy handbag or that crazy holidays? Maybe not. But you still want to feel like you're alive and you deserve something for working so hard and all of this. So that's where light luxury comes in. So I mentioned the lipstick, but it could be also going to the Ami Cafe in Tokyo that is operated by Arabica, actually, where you can have a fancy coffee in a very fancy environment, but at the end of the day, it costs you less than $10. Or I think the Ritz in Paris with this teddy bear, you can buy the huge teddy bear for, I think it's 180 euros, which is extremely expensive for a teddy bear, but it's okay. You can still get the teddy bear. And I would expect to see a lot of this. So it creates, I think, attention for a lot of brands that have been thriving in the middle class. I think the ultra luxury, as always, is a bit protected from any economic fluctuations because, if you have 7 billion or 5 billion, it doesn't really change your purchasing power. But if you are in that in between, I think that's where brands have to be smart about it. We expect quite a bit of things to come up here. If you think about hotels, we see a trend of young people who would typically just come one night in a very fancy hotel for the Instagram pictures, for the experience, etc. And the rest of the trip, they would stay in even a kind of a budget hotels. Or people would come just for the afternoon tea or the restaurant ones, etc. And I think if you look at hotel industry, for example, there's a question of, do you want to have those guests, which are to an extent wannabe, or at least economical wannabe, or do you actually want to focus only on the top tier, which obviously is a bit harder from a marketing standpoint. All right. So those are 5 trends. To be honest, there could be so many more. And my team and I, and a special thank you to Carmen and Anaïs who helped me prepare this presentation. We felt that these were 5 things that were quite that could be used for you and very tangible, I think, and pragmatic. Now, while we speak about trends, we realize it's very hard not to address AI. And what I wanted to share with you is, to be honest, a bit work in progress, because we are, as a company, Creative Supply, really, I think, in the shift for at least a year now to figure out how best to continue building brands for our clients in an age that has so many new challenges. Okay, so it's a bit of a lab, I would say. And so you're lucky to see those slides. And I think one of the first things I'd like to kind of share with you as a highlight of how things are changing, and I'm sure you have done this maybe this morning, is how we access brands, how we discover brands, how we are exposed to brands. And this is a basic search. I'm looking for an Italian L-shaped sofa with a modern design. It should be max 260 meter wide. It should not sag. It should be very good quality. I want someone who can deliver to Switzerland. This does sound like my sofa search from 5-6 years ago, I'll admit. And what's interesting there is that obviously AI finds out whatever is relevant based on your request and gives you a brand and a model. So the distribution of how you are exposed to a brand is completely different. So as a brand point of view, things like storytelling and visual identity and all of these things are still important, but not the way they used to be. And it's a bit like everything happens without the visibility of the customer, so to speak. Everything happens under, and at the end, there's just one thing at the top. So you as a brand, obviously, you want to find ways to be that one thing at the top. But that one thing at the top is increasingly difficult because, many people estimate that by this year, actually, 90% of online content that is going to be produced is going to be AI generated. So it makes it, I think, really, really hard to stand out in an ocean of content. The second thing is the fact that we've seen AI agents, the traffic of AI agent has increased year to year by 4,700%. I don't know the real numbers, but it's huge. Now, when you hear AI agent, you think, oh, there's going to be some AI agent that's going to order the food for your fridge and talk to your colleague and help your kids with the homework and report to you at the end of the day. I think that time will still take a bit of time. We'll get there, but I think it's going to take a lot of time until can really work practically. However, asking some Perplexity or ChatGPT bot and say, hey, I'm looking for a pair of sneakers to go run in Spain during the winter that is waterproof and does X and Y and has a cool style and is, worn by celebrity, that is already today. So as a brand, that means it's pushing to a lot of transparency on the brands because so much information is actually not available online at the moment. Think furniture buying in Europe. Right? You want to know, can you deliver it? Do you have a different fabric? Is the fabric fireproof? Is it waterproof? How do I clean the fabric? All these questions that you would have. And I'm sure you went through that. And the thing is that if you have to call or send an email to get that information, that means that information is not findable by an AI agent. So it's almost as a brand, you have two customers, right? You have the real customer that's going to end up buying whatever you have, and you have the AI agent that is scrapping the web to try to understand who the hell you are. And who the hell you are is not just a storytelling that says, inspired by the wood, we create modern design. It's about saying, we're inspired by the wood, but we have that type of wood that has that type of weight and that type of sustainability index and that type of everything, so that when people search something, they find you. And that is pushing a lot of change in transparency, because that means if you don't share that information about you, nobody will find you. And it's a double-sided coin, because if you do share that information, well, everybody else has access to it. So it's no longer proprietary. And that makes it, I think, another challenge. If I continue on different things about AI, and then I kind of try to wrap it up, real or fake, does it matter? There's a huge discussion at the moment about, is this a real image? Is this okay to use AI in the Coca-Cola ad? Or Mango did a whole ad campaign just using AI. The model you see bottom left doesn't exist, for example. My gut feeling is that in a few months, year, it will no longer be a problem, because we will really not see the difference anymore. So it's obviously relevant when you have people saying something, and I'm talking about in the realm of fake news here. Obviously, the authenticity has to be very clear. But when it comes to building up visuals for brand, for example, or campaign or brand movies, if you can't tell the difference, does it actually matter? It's a bit like, for me, it sounds like a discussion about should we use Photoshop to retouch our pictures or not, which was a discussion, and now nobody speaks about this anymore. But it also means that everybody can copy you very, very fast. So I wanted to look a bit at the key challenges we see with AI when it comes to looking at brands and looking at both demand and supply side. On the demand side, so customers, we see a huge shift in distribution via AI and search agent. To be found, people search answers via Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. That's one thing. Two, we see the rise of what we call at Creative Supply the DIY customers, the do-it-yourself. And that means I have a bit of pain in my neck. What should I do? I like to change my bicycle tires. What should I do? I want to draft a contract. What should I do? And all of this knowledge that used to be asymmetric, right? Your doctor used to know so much more than you, or your accountant used to know so much more than you. That asymmetry of information is decreasing. It doesn't mean that you're as competent as your doctor, but it means that you know much, much more. And for certain things, you can really do it yourself. And I'm sure some of you have probably reviewed a contract using ChatGPT, and you think, yeah, it's just 3 hours of a lawyer. But that's millions of lawyers in the world that right now don't get those 3 hours of billables anymore because someone using ChatGPT instead. So the rise of DIY customers is shifting the value proposition of a lot of businesses, both physical and digital. And finally, ultra-informed customers, which is connected to this from a demand shift, means that people can know so much about it. Let's say they're buying shoes or looking for a fiduciary. What do I know? If they want to ask questions to a fiduciary, they can just ask Gemini to tell, hey, what are good questions to ask a fiduciary to know if they are the right one? Essentially prepping their calls. So if the fiduciary is not ready for that level of scrutiny from customers, it's going to have a lot of difficulty sustaining the business. Now, if we look on the supply side, and we look at the shift, so really people selling something. The first one is the commoditization of brand identity, and we've just seen this with the example I show you with AI-generated visuals. Obviously, AI today is nowhere close to generating a beautiful, unique, well-thought-through brand identity. We have done a lot of tests. It doesn't work. However, it can copy a very good one. And that means that it can be good enough for probably 90% of the world is okay to have good enough visuals. But think about it. If everybody is starting to have good enough visuals, nobody's really going to stand out anymore. It's just going to be like a key business factor. It's no longer going to be a competitive advantage. You know, the same way you pay your VAT and you pay your tax. Well, yeah, you have to do it. The same way, having a decent website and a decent visual identity, you won't have an excuse not to do it because you can get it done in AI in 2 seconds. Now, but is it really good? Does it really stand out? Well, everybody is using it. Yours is definitely not going to stand out. So it's raising the bar for execution, quality, and design. So there's no space for anything under top quality for brands, because anything else is commoditized and done by AI. So I think that it's really raising the bar in what needs to be done in branding. And I'll talk about this in the last part. Saturation of content and offering, and finally, intensified cost pressure, right? When do you need a physiotherapist, or do you describe your AI to your problem to an AI and tells you what exercises to do? So is there a AI physiotherapist that costs cheaper, right? And that's putting, again, a pressure on cost overall. So all of these things together are creating a big shift in how we create value as a brand, but I think how we defend it very importantly as well. And how we defend it or how we evolve from there, I think we need a bit of a shift of mindset. I think so far, since the 1950s, to be honest, branding has always been a bit of a surface exercise. And by surface, I mean that, it's a seal of approval. You sell something, and you're going to put a seal that says, hey, it's good. You can trust that thing because there's my logo on it. And then it becomes more about identity in the 80s and the 90s, and say, but it's still about a coating that you put on. And you have a pen and you try to build a coating around that pen. Surface branding. But surface branding can be copied, as we see it with AI, so easily. So it's no longer a point of differentiation. Where we think this is going, and I'm not sure we're going to stick to that term to tell you the truth, but I think it describes best what we are trying to do, is to speak about building up what we call deep brand. And by deep brands, I mean that they have a lot of depth. And it means that the brands act a bit as the operating system of a company, let's say, that govern decision, behavior, and growth across the organization. It's not just about how the organization looks or talks. Now, as you know, there's different operating systems in a company. There's the legal operating system that's going to look at everything from a legal standpoint. And there's the financial operating system that's going to look at everything from a revenue or cost point of view. Looking at things with a branding operating system requires a shift in thinking. But it's the only way to do it in a way that you can actually protect your business and having a brand that have depth. And I'll show you an example after. So when we speak about deep branding, what are we talking about? I think different elements. The first one is that non-generic, what I call good enough positionings are no longer okay. I mean, generic good enough positioning is not okay. We need non-generic good enough positioning. Think about it. AI technically is a probability tool, right? It looks at the most probable solution to something. What is the most probable answer to that problem questions? So if you ask, create a nice positioning for my toothbrush brand, it's going to give you something that's very generic. So the only way is to get it to a level that is non-generic, but that requires a bit of craft. So you can obviously ask AI, hey, give me a non-generic way to sell a toothbrush, of course, to position it. But then you need the judgment to know if this is the right thing or not, which hopefully I think will still be human for a while. Second thing, you need IP-based storytelling. A storytelling that is just, excuse my French, bullshit coated on a product or services will not fly because it can be copied immediately. So we need to have something that that is anchored in some things you can protect. Like if you have customer data that only you has that gives you certain view on it, your storytelling has to use that as a base. If you are a hotel and you are the only one with the view on the sea, that has to be central in your storytelling. If you used to have celebrity guests, that has to be part of your storytelling. Because if you don't have this IP-based storytelling, you have generic storytelling. And if you have generic storytelling, you're not going to stand out. All the touch points, if you want to bring that depth, you need to integrate them. And not in a way that marketing is handling our campaigns and operations is doing what they have to do in services. All of those things have to come together. The way an operating system works on a computer, where everything that happens on that computer is driven by that central OS, if you like. And we need to have that at a company level, because if you now take a Uber service, technically a lot of things are centrally controlled. If you look at most of the brands, every department is doing their own thing, and branding is some sort of department that is updating PowerPoints and telling people to use the right font. But it doesn't specify much about what product are we launching, how are we delivering them, should we have that partnership or not, what type of people do we hire, all those things that have an impact on the end experience for the customer. Proprietary data, we discussed this through IP storytelling, so it's definitely part of that. Real life presence. The digital world is unlimited, right? There can be more and more and more and more content and things. It's not limited by the laws of physics. The real life is, right? There's that many space in a city. There's that many people that can come to your event, etc., etc. And that has more value than ever. Because if you can build that real life presence, which is, let's be honest, harder and harder, you have a brand that have depth, that is not just living on the surface on the internet. And cultural capital, I wrote an article about this, which we can share with you, about this in the sense that a brand that only reacts to culture by copying what's existing are not building up their own cultural capital. And cultural capital is something you can actually protect. And I put 3 dots because I don't think it's an exhaustive list at this stage. It's more work in progress for us. But it gives this idea that brands have to be built with much, much, much more depth. Which means from a skill set point of view, by the way, branding is not just about pretty design and fonts and marketing campaigns somewhere. We've been using that model for a while that you see on the screen, which we call the brand experience blueprint. But I wanted to look at it from in the light of what I just shared with you at the moment, looking at branding as an infrastructure for everything that happens in a company, and keeping the notion that, you have the story, your IP-based story at the center, and that you're going to use this to inform every element of it. And that coherence, that consistency makes it actually very hard to copy, because you have an integrated offering. Everybody will be able to copy, your space design, for example. Or if you have a cool product, people can copy your product. But can they copy all of the different things together? I wanted to give you 2 examples of 2 brands that essentially sell the same thing, like kind of outdoor clothing, but have very, very different way to do that. And Patagonia, not my favorite brand, but actually very good branding, has as a core that story of, we are saving our planet. We are saving our planet thanks to our business. Questionable ethically, but that's the story they're telling. And then that story is getting a lot of depth at all different levels, from the brand identity, the communication channel they use, the advertising they have, the partnership or certification in that case that they would have, the way they have even team events, the way they offer life guarantees and repair service, or even the look of their own shops. And everything kind of bring back to that strong notion. So you have a lot of depth. It's like you have different layers. You can copy each of those elements very easily. You can become Big Orc. You can have a book, which is a grassroots activist book. You can do all of those things separately. But the probability of you doing all of them is very unlikely. Plus, if you do all of them, people are going to say, oh, but you are like Patagonia, which means the ownership of that system is still owned by Patagonia. So that's what we would call a deep brand. It also means that it's harder to move and it needs constant update, if I use the operating system metaphor. And then in comparison, this is a different brand called, maybe some of you know, it's called Outdoor Voices. It's a much younger brand that is also saying outdoor and clothing and equipment, but they're much more focused on what they call doing things. So it's not a performance brand. It's not about reconnecting with nature. It's a brand for the couch potatoes. It's basically telling you, hey, if you go out, it's good. You already went out. And if you play badminton for an hour, hey, it's amazing. You played badminton. That's great. You know what I mean? So they're really trying to build it up in a way that the story is not about saving the planet. It's not about reaching your potential. It's just about, doing good stuff and doing it with friends and being outdoor. And that's great. So in an age where people are lacking friends and having mental issues and not getting out enough and stuck with their screen, this definitely resonates. And everything around it, same logic, will be built there. So they would have a walking club, which is just about going in for a walk together. I'm not talking about a hike, just a nice walk. Their brand identity is like this vintage 80s look about people playing badminton. They have collaboration with brands that are much more lifestyle than pure sport of performance. They would have, monthly meeting called The Smile to speak about what's working and what isn't, for internal meeting, etc. Their known kind of signature product is the exercise dress. It's a dress that you can do some exercise. And finally, all their space design looks like a beautiful, almost like beauty shop for the community. It's more of a feminine brand, I would argue. But you see, at the end of the day, you can buy a jacket or like a warm gilet, be from Patagonia or from Outdoor Voice. From a product point of view, 95% of it is the same. However, what you're buying into, why you're buying into it is very different because the depth of each of those brands is obviously very different. So I think that was a different insight, and you see I've packed a lot of different ideas, and some of them are clear and some of them are still, I think, information. So if we had to reach a bit of a summary of where to get competitive advantage in 2026, in the age of AI, we see this as three things. One, nothing beats raw human thinking. And honestly, it's hard to do because it's so tempting to quickly ask Claude or ChatGPT, oh, what do you think? Is this a good idea? Would you do it that way? But actually starting the thinking, the conceptualizing with analog thinking just cannot be beaten. We are seeing it at the moment. We are building up a brand identity for a client fully using AI. So we're doing everything with AI. And we started with AI and the result was horrible. And then we took a step back and we say, well, what do we really want to do? What is the idea, etc.? And we did all the raw thinking with AI, with ourselves. And then we amplified it with AI. And that made a huge, huge difference. The second part is about the depths. I mentioned to you the depth of experience. It's about vertical integration. It's about experience that is holistic. It's about bundling the offering. It's about basically creating something that is not easily replicable and easily copyable. The age of drop shipping on Alibaba is, I think, is a bit gone. And offline inspiration, which is connected to the first one in a way, but anything you can find as ideas that is not on the web gives you an advantage because anything that's on the web has been scrapped by AI. That means it's available. So you want to find things that are not available. And actually, there's a lot of them. It's just that you need to go in your local libraries and find a book that nobody has opened. You need to go down the street and see what is written on that graffiti. You need to really listen to what people are saying, the way they are saying it, the way they are speaking, the word they are using. And that actually gives you inspiration and a lead time over your competitors. Because obviously, by the time you start using it, it's going to be online, which means it can be copied. So the speed of constant perpetual novelty, as I was speaking at the beginning, is unavoidable. So as you see, I think everything I've been saying, there's a bit of a lot of optimism at the time. There's caution, but let's relax because whether you believe it or not, robots still cannot tie a shoe. So we live in a world where everything can be done with AI and technology, but tying your shoe is still your own business. It's going to take a while until something can really do it. So I think we can relax a little bit from that point of view. I wanted to highlight to you the next webinars because we have a really cool lineup for this year. In February, we're going to speak about personal branding in the AI era. And I think the notion of personal branding is taking a whole new level in the AI era. So we're going to discuss this, and depending on the interest, we might even organize a physical kind of one-day training on the topic. Let's see. In March, we're going to speak about destination brands and how do we build destinations, be it neighborhoods, villages, or even cities. In April, we're going to speak about AI companies. If you are building up an AI solution, a startup, etc., how do you brand it? In May, we speak about luxury, but again, I think focusing on the next generation of it. And in June, we will speak about hospitality concepts and how how to build resilient ones. And you can see on the screen the QR code. This is a WhatsApp group that we have for people who participate to a webinar or sessions that we give, etc. And I think just subscribe so that you can hear about some cool insights that we have. We don't spam you, don't worry. And you can hear about all the next webinars so you don't miss. And while you are at it with your phone, I have what do I call this? A favor to ask you. And some of you might know my begging time. That's my begging time. We live on reviews. We live on recommendations. AI agents find us through our reviews. Shorts, we need reviews from you guys. So if you can take literally 30 seconds, a minute of your time, just to share a few words about how was the session for you? Did you learn something? Was it useful? Did you pick up something on Google Maps? You have no idea how much this helps us. So I'd like to really thank you in advance for all of you who would give us a review. And thank you for all of you who have already given us reviews in the past. This is really nice. And I think this gives us a little bit of time for some questions of comment. So I can give you a second to think about those, and then we can pick up questions or comments that you have. Can just write them in the chat directly if there are any questions. Question Chirag here. Thanks a lot, Chirag, for your question. Based on these trends, how do you think the skill set for brand managers will change going forward? It's a good question. Today, brand managers are doing a lot of work which is connected to policing. Is the font the right one? Are you using the right tone of voice? That job is disappearing. There's no other way around it. I think the brand manager will have to make much more connection between real life and digital, and be able to be more of a guide for AI and an oversight for AI. I think that's the reality of it. So I think the job is going to evolve in that direction. So soft skills become quite important. I have always been, but I think will become more important because your capacity to connect with people in real life will become an advantage that AI cannot beat for, I think, forever. Because, if you have a real person in front of you, you always feel different than if you have a patient AI listening to everything you say. Actually, yeah, from Alexandra. What's your opinion about recent Hermes hand-painted art for the website instead of AI? Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of luxury brands. Porsche has done the same thing where they did a whole ad at the moment with traditional motion design and not using AI. I think it's a way to justify the craft and to say, hey, we are high-end luxury, and high-end luxury is made by hand, and that's why we stick to this. It's a bit like Swiss luxury watches. You don't need any of it. It has zero functional value, but still people are willing to pay thousands for the fact that it was built by hand. So I think the ultra luxury, and so Hermes is a good example, will definitely stay and makes total sense for them because that's what you want. But now if you get something from Tommy Hilfiger, just to get an example, do you care if the ad is made by AI or not? Honestly, I think a bit less. So it does make sense for the ultra luxury to stick probably to things that are hard to replicate, and that takes time because it justifies the price. If you buy a Rolls Royce, you know that the lights in the car are put by hand, even though it could be done by a machine. But the fact that it was made by hand creates value in it, not the functionality behind it. A question from Mary. Thanks, Mary. With the changes in demographics and customer behaviors, where do you think would hotels be heading? The one that prides themselves with high quality service. I'm doing a session actually in Paris at the beginning of February on that topic, exactly, La Fabrique du Tourisme, together with Extendam. Maybe I'm too radical, but I'm really thinking that we need to find out a way to offer incredibly good service without human. And to be honest, if you stay in any hotels let's take Paris, which is not 5-star, the service is always a bit shaky. Even if they say there's good service, one day it's good service, the day after is not that good service. So I think we need to find ways to do this with technology in a way that's really breathtaking. I've been trying very hard to work with hoteliers who have 4-star plus project to build much more technology in the experience, but there's a cultural resistance to it. But I think the next generation of customers will force the change. I think no way around it. Anne-Sophie, thank you, Anne-Sophie. Do you think 26 will see a shift back towards handmade, authentic work as a counter to AI-generated work? I mean, yes, but only when it makes sense, because in so many aspects, it doesn't add as much value, or the cost is not justified anymore. I can give you an example. Even us, like we're building an identity at the moment for a very kind of high-end traditional client, and we need like about 25 different icons and drawn. It's much faster to do this with AI, and nobody will ever see the difference. So I think we will see a return to it only when it can be sold and add value. Right? If you buy a silk foulard from Hermes that has a handmade illustration, the fact that it's handmade adds value to the end product. If it doesn't add value to the end product, the fact that it's handmade, I think there's absolutely zero reason to do it, economically speaking. So I think that's what's going to define it, the end perception of the customers on the value on this. That's what's going to define it. So I think just going back to handmade as a act of propaganda, of resistance, might be cute, but not make a big impact in the grand scheme of things. Can you give an example of applying the light luxury for a boutique hotel? Yeah, I mean, I gave the example of the Ritz, for example, that just suddenly had this teddy bear that's actually expensive, but that you can still afford. I would think, if you just have a certain types of offering that is accessible, but it feels very luxurious, and I think it would depend on the type of boutique hotel, that's where you would be able to create that light luxury. Creates the questions for where does your revenue come from, obviously. All right, guys, that was a lot of very cool questions. So if you haven't, let me do my last begging of the day. Please give us a review. And thank you to all of you. It's quite a full webinar today. For all of you who've been following us, to join those webinars and to spend this 1 hour with us. Really, really cool in, preparing this, sharing this idea, hearing your questions. It's a double-way street. We learn a lot from it. It gives us ideas. So thank you very much to all of you and to my team for helping me put this together. And I look forward to seeing you for our next webinar in February, which you will hear about it if you are in the WhatsApp group. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good afternoon, morning, or night, depending on where you are in the world. And talk to you soon. Goodbye.